Good evening, Oakland. Yay. On behalf of the Board of Directors of the Oakland Heritage Alliance, my name is Amelia Marshall. I'd like to welcome you to this exciting opportunity to see Andrew Alden's brand new book. Before we bring Andrew on, I'd like to introduce the members of the Board of Directors who are here with us this evening. Where's our wonderful president, Mary Harper? She's out there somewhere. She's probably at the front table. Yeah, still tabling. Whoa. And we've got our expert on the audiovisual presentation equipment, preservation architect, Charles Booker. And everyone's favorite former presidents, we've got Allison Finley. Yeah. And the Queen of Preservation Action, Naomi Schiff. Who else we got? We've got some newer board members who are business people. We've got Felicia Favreau, she here, and Linda Taylor. We've got Tom Haw, the expert schmoozer in our group, and his lovely wife, Tamara Haw-Nikoloff, who is the photographer who did the wonderful photographs in the current OHA newsletter that is produced by Naomi Schiff and Erica Mailman. Yay. So who else have we got? Have I missed everybody? I know I'm missing someone. Catherine Hughes, author Catherine Hughes. And I see a lot of other good folks that are here tonight. Some of our beloved tour leaders. We got Riley Doty. We've got Kathleen DiGiovanni. We've got Pamela Magnuson-Peddle. Who else have I missed? Raise your hand if you're a tour leader. Okay, all right. Now, if there's anyone here who might be interested in joining our board, we can fit a couple new board members on. So just flag one of the board members down if you have any interest in that. And if by some chance you're not a member of the Oakland Heritage Alliance, the friendly people at the table will be glad to give you all the information. So, how many people here have been on one of Andrew Alden's Geology history tours before? Raise your hand if you've been. Yeah. How many people were on his hike to the San Antonio neighborhood? Oh gosh, I love that one. Absolutely love it. And how many people were on the tour of the Wilshire Heights landslide area with Andrew and with Dennis Evanowski? He's on it, you know, this Andrew Alden character. He really knows Oakland. And how many people read his Monday published blog? The fans are out tonight. Okay. Well, this is so exciting. We love Andrew's tours. We're so glad that Heyday sees the opportunity to publish Deep Oakland. It's a beautiful book full of fantastic information. Without any further ado, I bring you Andrew Alden.
Hi folks, is this working? Is this on? No?
Is the one in the background on?
Yes.
That's what I'll do. Okay. It's great to see you all. It's been a while since I was here. It was 2011, if I recall correctly. And I introduced every rock unit in the city of Oakland. I'm not going to do that tonight since you've all learned that by now. I did want to start out by acknowledging that where we're sitting and where we live is the land of the Ohlonies. They have been here for thousands of years. They've been here since the beginning of time. And this is their city, and we belong to their city. The book that everybody's talking about is Deep Oakland, how geology shaped the city. It's a weird thing. It's a braided history of Oakland's landscape and geology and the people who live there. And it's got a cast of characters. The city of Oakland, a very ambitious place that tried for a long time to outdo San Francisco. There are 3 different waves of humans that have lived in the territory I'm going to talk about, and the land that they found, and then the geology underneath it, which people did not find out about until later, for the most part. I'm going to be, it'll be just a little geology, just a sketch. I'm not going to address a topic that I think would be worth another talk, which is called geoheritage. What kind of things in Oakland's geology are worth preserving along the same lines we think about our culture and our buildings and so on. I'm going to skip that tonight, but we'll come back and do that some other time. Now, Oakland's geography is, we all know it, but it's kind of hard to recognize when there's no labels on it. But when you look at it from space, from high in the air, you see a lot of buildings. You see the ocean, you see Lake Merritt attached to the bay. You see this kind of long line running up between the high hills and the low hills and the flats. And then there's the geology underneath it, and this is totally different. This is a map of the bedrock and the different bodies of sediment in the flats. The bedrock is more, oops, excuse me. The bedrock is, all right, go the wrong way here. Go the wrong way. Yeah. Okay, that's where we are. Thank you. The bedrock gets all the good colors. The alluvium, the sediments, they get pale colors because they're very young things. And the rocks are different colors. You'll see that later on. I'll illustrate that part. But basically, we've got rocks in the hills and alluvium, which is stream-washed sediment, kind of sand and gravel and mud that washes out of the hills with streams. So that's the very basic geology. You'll also see this pink area all up and down the bay. That's all artificial land. That's kind of a big theme of what I'll be talking about. Humans have made this land. You know, a lot of that geography I showed you is actually human-made. And then we have the tectonics of Oakland. This is the deep, really deep underground forces that are moving Oakland around. And it's very simple, it's the Hayward Fault. That accounts for that straight line you saw in the hills, and it crosses some very important pieces of ground. It's right here at the Claremont Resort. It's here behind the cemetery. It's right there at Lake Temescal. It's the whole Montclair neighborhood. It runs all the way down by the dam at Lake Chabot. And runs through the Oakland Zoo, too. So it's one of our intimate civic partners. I'm going to turn this sideways and show you what the big story of why Oakland looks the way it does today. The two sides of the Hayward Fault are moving this way. The west side is moving north. It's sort of attached to the Pacific lithospheric plate, and the other side is the North America plate. And every time we have an earthquake, it moves, a big earthquake, excuse me, not every earthquake. Every big earthquake, it moves about 1 meter or 2 to the north. So on the average, we've estimated over the last few thousand years how fast the two sides of the fault are moving. It's about 10 millimeters a year. And that's real easy. That's a kilometer every 100,000 years. So if you go back 1 million years, this is the Piedmont Hills, the upper side of the cemetery here. And if you take it back 1 million years, it goes right opposite San Leandro. And San Leandro's got a great big body of, it's called gabbro. It's a relative of granite, a very strong body of intrusive rock. And my theory is that when this was sliding north and it bumped against this body bumped against that body, the two irresistible, immovable objects ran into each other, and when that happens along a fault like this, the only way they can adjust to each other is to get pushed upward. And so I think that's what happened 1 million years ago. And at that time, this San Leandro Creek cut Diamond Canyon across it while it was rising. And so then for the next 1 million years, it's been sliding along, and different streams up here have been flowing across it. Today, Shepherd Canyon, Shepherd Creek, Palo Seco Creek, they join and form Saucil Creek. And that's what's flowing there today, but Saucil Creek did not carve that canyon. So anyway, when this body of rock got shoved up, so did the old gravel that was lying over it. This gravel is normally buried underneath this gravel, hundreds of meters deep. And so this is kind of a weird, distinctive landform. It's very, this is what I call the fan, and that's what I call that because it's what it looks like on the map. And that is Oakland's, that's the part of Oakland nobody knows what it is, but when you read the book, you know what it is. Okay, so that's the last 1 million years. That takes us up to the geologic present, maybe the last few tens of millions of years, tens of thousands of years, when humans showed up about maybe 20,000 years ago. They're still arguing about that. And just as Oakland has wonderful architectural variety in it, this is on 13th Street. We've got our neoclassical old library. We've got our wonderful deco courthouse. We've got our classic brutalist county office building. And then we got this. And what would you call that? Sort of 62 space age. This wonderful, strange parking structure. One of my favorite views in Oakland. And just as we have architectural variety, we also have cultural variety. We have, more languages spoken here, anywhere outside of LA and Manhattan, places like that. We also have a great lithographic variety. We have the Hayward Fault for the last 12 million years, and it has not always been on this simple line. It's taken other routes during those 12 million years, and it's assembled all these different rocks of different ages. And we'll look at some of those later on too. So we've got, this is a whole new thing about Oakland that I discovered and that I hope we can all be proud of. Oakland is variety all the way down, from the surface on down. And then down to the flats, we've got some variety as well. We've got your classic alluvium, the flats, which go all up and down the East Bay. And then we have this stuff from the fan, which is quite a bit older. It's about 500,000 or so years. We don't really know because there aren't any fossils in it. And then we have these sand dunes. That's on a big farm island. And these formed at the height of the last ice age 20,000 years ago, when the bay was completely dry. The sea level was 400 feet below today. And the coastline was out by the Farallones. And it was during the ice age. It was very cool and wet. We had mammoths rolling around, grazing on the plains, and the winds howled through the Golden Gate and carried wind-blown sand all the way across San Francisco, which is all sand dunes, as you may know, and across what's now the floor of the bay, and all the way over onto this side, and laid down these thick sand dunes. They're as thick as 60 feet thick. So that's another wonderful bit of variety in Oakland that other cities in the East Bay can't boast of. And what the Ohlonys did, we'll get into the human history now. The Ohlonys used it, this landscape for various uses. They had they maintained large oak groves on these sand dunes. They would come and harvest acorns and firewood. They would set fire to it every now and then just to keep the ground clean and restore nutrients to the soil. And they also set fire to all the rest of the landscape. I assume they left the redwoods alone. They may have fired them too, because redwoods are fire resistant. But they kept the hills entirely grass covered. They kept the flats entirely grass covered. There are probably some oak trees and whatnot in the valleys. And the streams, the major streams in the meadows, they would nurture groves of useful species for basket materials and to make reeds for their boats and arrows and all the other things to make their houses and so on. And where we have artificial land, they use the marshes to fish in and hunt in and gather oysters and build their shell mounds out of the remains of their dinners. And they did this for thousands of years. They groomed the landscape to sustain them. So in that sense, it was not a natural landscape. It was an inhabited landscape. And it took them, I'm sure it took them a long time to work this out. You move to a place, and they had to adapt to the changing climate. It's been getting warmer and drier over the last few thousand years, and they adapted. Things moved slowly enough that they could do that. And they had two concerns that had to do with geology. One of them was this mineral deposit up in the Leona Heights area. It was a large body of ochre. And ochre is a set of earthy, very colorful iron oxide minerals that is the best thing. Humans have used it to make pigments and paint with for tens of thousands of years. Those old cave paintings in Europe are made with this material. The pharaohs used it, and the Ohlonys used it. The Ohlonys were lucky because this is the only ochre deposit in pretty much the greater Bay Area. So they would go up, regularly and mine it and process it, and they traded it. Traded it with the neighboring tribes. Neighboring tribes down the South Bay, they had salt flats. They would trade for salt. The tribes in the Napa Valley had obsidian. They traded arrowheads. They finished arrowheads all over the Bay Area. The coastal Pacific Coast tribes, they gather abalone shells and make decorative beads, and shell beads, things to weave into ceremonial costumes. And the ochre, the body paint, was very important for the tribes, because most of them didn't wear any clothes at all. You know, that was California, you know. They were good Californians, but they had a lot of ceremonial clothing, and so ochre was good for coloring themselves. It was also good for mosquito repellent and sun protection and so on. So it was a very useful material. And the other thing they cared about with respect to geology was regular large earthquakes. And this is the record we have gathered over the last 2,000 years, mainly by geologists digging trenches across the Hayward Fault and examining the deposits down underneath. And this is the chronology. It's not a real clock-like beat. It's not a disco beat, but it does have a rhythm to it. The rhythm is that these events happen on average of 165 years, plus or minus 65 years. So that's quite a large leeway. Time between 90 years apart to 200 years apart. And so when geologists say, well, you know, the average is 165 years, the last big earthquake was 165 years ago, it's easy to think that we're due, you know. That's a mistake to think about earthquakes. Earthquakes are not buses. Earthquakes they're not trains. They're not due, they're not overdue. But I'll talk a little more about the fault later. I just wanted to say that when the Ohlonies knew about the earthquakes, they happened often enough that they could remember them. They could pass down stories about them. And I imagine, I don't know this for sure, but they may well have told a story rather similar to a story that's been recorded from the southern Bay Area Ohlonies about the sea monster called Makoweks. And I think that I prefer to interpret Makoweks as something similar to what the ancient Greeks called Poseidon. Poseidon was the god in charge of earthquakes and the ocean. And that makes sense because, you know, big earthquakes, especially in the Mediterranean, often created large tsunamis, you know. Our own fault, not so much. But the story they told about Makoweks, and I can't really tell it, but I can summarize it. And the story goes that Coyote took his wife down to the seashore and introduced the different creatures of the sea to her. The whales and the seals and the sturgeon, and introduced them all to her and told her, you know, these creatures are our uncles. You need to know them, and when you know them, they're uncles, they're our relatives, they're part of the world, they belong to our world. But Coyote he neglected to tell her about Makoweks. And so she was standing there, and Makoweks showed up, and she was so frightened she fell down dead. And so Coyote said, oh, darn, now I have to bring her back to life again. So he went through the whole procedure of bringing her back to life again. And I think the underlying message of a story like that is that there are deadly forces underground. The earth activates them. And they can kill us if we don't know about them and recognize them and live accordingly. So I think that's a kind of good lesson for all of us to adopt from the Ohlonies, and if I understand them right. get to written history. When the Spanish explorers showed up in 1770, they rounded up all the tribes they could and chased away the others. The others ran away and gathered them up to the missions. We all know it was a historical atrocity. But what it meant for the East Bay is that the East Bay was empty. It was empty ground. This is a map that Captain Beechey made in 1826 and published the following year. And you can see there are no settlements at all. There was no settlements at all in the East Bay at that time. There was, in a few years, the Presidio operated a farm on the Rancho San Pablo. They grew vegetables and grains and fodder and so on. Because San Francisco is lousy ground for growing anything. No offense to San Franciscans, but it's just the truth. And so Captain Beechey saw that there's just nothing to speak of over here. But soon enough, the Spanish crown awarded the stretch of the East Bay to Luis Maria Peralta, and he divided it among his sons later in 1840. And they found that these major creeks, this one in particular, and this one in particular, were handy boundaries between the ranchos of the four sons. Other than that, it was just an empty flat that had cattle roaming all around, because that's what the missionaries did. The San Jose mission, they just, with all that meadow that the Ohlonies left behind, they said, oh, this is great cattle range, and they just let them roam, and they would round them up once or twice a year and slaughter them and so on. So the East Bay at that time was just a cattle-strewn flat. There's nothing else going on. But then later on, when the Mexican period people, that was the era of the ranchos. And here we have Vicente Peralta's ranch was there, his headquarters were there, and Antonio Peralta's rancho was there. And between it all, it was all cattle range. They still let the cattle run up and down the bay, up and down the East Bay, and they would round them up once or twice a year and brand them, sort them out, and so on. They used the oak groves for firewood, and they used the creeks, the bays, for shipping channels. And they left the redwoods alone, because they didn't really have a use for them. The redwoods were the property of the Spanish crown, so they couldn't use them. But they left them alone. They were actually supposed to be protecting them. The missions were officially in charge of the groves. And that went on till about 1850. I do wonder about the relationship between the natives, the Ohlonies of their various tribes, and the Spanish, the missionaries, and the ranchos, because they were the servant class. They were the slaves of the period. But at the same time, they were also, and this is kind of an analogy with the Africans, they used them for amusement too. They'd say, dance for us. And I like this picture because it shows, they were still real big on body paint. And when Antonio Peralta, his ranch covered the old ochre mines. And Dennis Emanowski, who knows more about this period than I do, believes that Antonio recognized the link. He recognized how precious that deposit was to the people on his rancho. And so that's kind of an unsung story. How much of their culture did they maintain. They must have, because they still remember the new piece of land that the Ohloni's got up in Joaquin Miller Park earlier this year. They gave it a name, which I should remember it by now, but it means a place above the red ochre. So, you know, they honor that to this day. And then in 1850, the three squatters, Andrew Moon, Edson Adams, and Horace Carpenter, rode across the bay, and this is what they found. They didn't know what was there. All they knew was that there was this grove of oaks, there was this kind of high sandy ground. It wasn't like the rest of the East Bay. And they didn't know what lay underneath it, but as I've described to you already, it was pretty special. They just knew that it was good ground to start a city on, and so they did that. And within a few years, it looked like this. There was the original downtown Oakland from Broadway running up to 14th Street, about there, on one side. And this was where the Antonio Peralta's Rancho had their landing. You could see it was a navigable channel. It was the sea was only 5 feet deep at low tide right offshore, and it was just a half a league away from their hacienda. And then in the 1840s, during the Redwood Rush, that was the first thing the Europeans did when they showed up, was they cut all the redwoods down to help build San Francisco. And that was their landing. And actually, Brooklyn is older than Oakland. Brooklyn, although it was incorporated later, it was incorporated in 1856. It existed in the 1840s, before anyone lived here at all. So it's fun to think that, you know, if Brooklyn had played its cards differently, or if, you know, Carpenter had been a little less ruthless, we might be Brooklyn today instead of Oakland. Today there's nothing there at all. The port of Brooklyn disappeared, and there's only Vantage Point Park, a miserable little plot of grass overlooking the spot where Brooklyn once lay. Okay, quick reminder, this is what the Oakland Flats are. There's alluvium, two different kinds of alluvium and sand dunes. And that's how it looked. That was the original scene. And here's what the sand is. It's very, very fine. It's windblown sand. It's a salt shaker fine. It's hourglass fine. It doesn't have a single pebble in it. It has some clay, which makes it good foundation material. But when they started building Oakland, it was terrible. It was too sandy for wagon wheels and horses and so on. And so what the young city of Oakland said, well, if we want to be a proper city, we've got to pave the streets. And to do that, in the 1860s, the most advanced method of building city streets was the macadam method. And if you've laid down a gravel walk across a dirt garden, you know how it works. You dig a little shallow road bed, you lay a bed of fist-sized stones, and then a layer of finer gravel, and then a layer of finer gravel, and finally on top, the finest gravel and sand and rock dust. It's all sterile material. It makes a good road. This is probably somewhere in, my guess is Nigeria. Places where there's not the makings of concrete, they still use this old method of making roads. And that's what they did all over Oakland, and it was easy. What made it easy for Oakland was this body of bedrock. It was just an hour's wagon ride away from downtown. And very quickly, rock quarries got started there. The first one was Walter Blair's quarry in Piedmont in the 1850s. And in 1870, we got what we now know as the Rock Ridge Shopping Center quarry, which was the Oakland Paving Company, and down here where the Davies Tennis Stadium is, that was the Alameda Macadamizing Company. And then, of course, as years went on, more and more quarries opened. They're all over the place. These were the latest ones. This up at Sibley on the turn of the last century. And this was the Leona Quarry, which was actually operating all the way into the 2000s. So that was one big thing about Oakland's geology that helped make Oakland the city succeed. It had the best pavement. It was better pavement than San Francisco, even though San Francisco had a lot of, all those 7 hills were also rock quarries. You also need rock to build up wharves, and build up harbors. And so that was the other great advantage that Oakland had. And then the other thing was that you need to run a city is you need water. And Oakland relied on groundwater for the most part for all the way until 100 years ago. But first, here are the quarries. They used to look like, what they look like now. They do break down. They do need maintenance and renovation if you want to do anything with a quarry. So, if we think of Oakland, the city, versus Oakland's geology, it's either, you can look at it like a contest or you can look at it like a partnership. Oakland and the Bedrock were a pretty good partnership. As for water, this is what it was like. At every place in original Oakland, and this is the last bit of original Oakland, this is the party house. And they still have a well. They still have a well, it still works, it still keeps the place green. It's probably not all that potable. But because pretty soon all the old downtown domestic wells, every estate had one, they got polluted. There were horse stables, there was tanneries, everything, sewage, household sewage, everything was just dumped on the ground. And so the original groundwater didn't last very long. There were larger wells and here and there, and gradually they grew into water companies. Either, they would serve their block, but the way capitalism works, they would buy each other out and grow, or go bankrupt and be acquired. And by 1910, there were thousands of wells all over the city. This is from a very thorough report on the East Bay water scene. And the same was true, of course, of Alameda. Most of these, by 1910, most of them probably weren't working. There were a few very large ones, and those are the ones that the water companies operated. And yeah, we did have reservoirs. Anthony Chabot started these two, and his company, the Contra Costa Water Company, actually ended up winning the water wars of the 1890s. They ended up, although it was pretty awful, the last two rivals were sabotaging each other's wells. They were publishing false stories about each other, about chemical tests and pollution and so on. And all the time, the city was short of water. It was just one catastrophe after the next, plus droughts, of course. It's the trouble with the local water supply. And it took until 1923, 100 years ago this month, for the East Bay Municipal Utility District to be founded. The state had to pass a law allowing water companies to operate across county boundaries. That was all it took. And so East Bay Mud bought up all the existing water companies and their little local reservoirs here and there and on the other side of right on the other side of the hills. And after 6 years of breakneck effort, they managed to break free of this cycle. This is what the water supply looked like at its worst. You can see that we primarily relied on groundwater, and we primarily relied on this huge well field down there by Fremont, Alvarado, what's called the Niles Cone. But in 1914, the Alameda County Water District formed and tied up all those wells. So everybody up here was kind of out of luck. That well field I showed you in Oakland, that was just a small fraction of the demand. And when you look at the total demand in the East Bay, right now, I went and looked up East Bay Mud's service today. They're delivering 10 times that much water. So it was a big, big deal when East Bay Mud, when the dam was finished and the aqueduct went through. They actually literally had like 2 days to spare before, all the East Bay water supply was nothing but mud. It was just a really amazing story. If you read East Bay Mud's official biography called "Its Name Was MUD." But you can see how important the news was at the time. It was as important as the model airplane national champ who was in Oakland and the B'nai B'rith, meeting. It was big news. So, aside from stone and water, those are the main geologic partnerships we had. Although there was also an effect on the way the neighborhoods were developed. These are all working class neighborhoods, the flats, they still are. The middle class got these higher foothills. And of course Alameda was its own place. The shore we remade into a world-class seaport, a world-class airport. We had industry all up and down the shoreline where all the water was. So redwoods weren't there anymore. And the hills were pretty much left alone until the 1920s. And in the 1920s, well, the automobile happened. And all of a sudden the hills were accessible by automobile. And that's when the Realty Syndicate, as I said in the book, the Realty Syndicate realized its long-held dream. Finally there was gold and then there are hills. Earthquakes were important during Oakland's time, the American time. It was not true in the Spanish period. It was just this one little, well, it's not little, it was a major quake. It was the same size as the 2014 Napa earthquake, which caused $1 billion damage. But there was nothing going on in 1808 that they recorded in the Presidio. And there was this one in 1838. And that was it until statehood. And then there was this huge 1857 earthquake, which was felt across the entire state. That was the largest earthquake on record in California. That was even larger than 1906. And then immediately afterward, there was this whole flurry of them, and the largest of them all was in 1868, and that was on the Hayward Fault. The others were on other faults elsewhere in the Bay Area. And, when you talk about geology versus civilization, this is not a partnership. This was a struggle. In 1868, this building was brand new, and it survived. It did beautifully during the earthquake and the 1868 earthquake. And the daily transcript the next day described why. It is well braced with iron. And they said the same thing of the Sessions Block, which is apparently between 11th and 12th on Broadway. The Sessions building is still there today. It's Oakland's oldest significant building. We have a couple older ones here and there. That's our oldest significant building. And what we learned from that was that, and observers notice this about the Bay Area in general, is that we built buildings very strong and very low. 3 stories, maybe 4 at the most. It was a distinctive local building style. And all of old Oakland, all those old buildings in the 1870s, they reflect that practice. That's part of their integrity, their architectural integrity. Why it's such a neat thing that it got preserved. And today, the Hayward Fault is still there. This is up at Lake Temescal. It is down deep. It's locked. The sides are locked together. They're building up friction. On the surface, friction is not strong, so they get to move a little. And then way down deep, the rocks are so soft that they just kind of ooze along. But in between, they're locked. There are these rigid blocks gathering friction. And the seismologists have determined that they've saved up enough energy for the next one. The next one. It's ready. That's all I'm going to say about the fault. The other thing is that the Americans discovered the ochre deposit. The man who owned it, Fritz Wemer from Alameda, decided that I would make great material for a paint factory. And so that's what he did. He dug up all the ochre and turned it into a paint factory. And then underneath it, he discovered pyrite, fool's gold, this wonderful iron sulfide mineral. It's iron FeS2, pure iron and pure sulfur. And at the time, pyrite was the leading source of industrial sulfur, sulfuric acid, sulfur compounds were very useful for the chemical industry. And so the pyrite mines, there were several of them up here in Leona Heights. And an electric rail line took them down to Melrose, where there was a refinery, and they manufactured sulfuric acid there. Later on, there was another one, it was up in Richmond. But the pyrite boom only lasted through World War I, and then it petered out around 1930 because we discovered the huge beds of pure sulfur underneath the Gulf Coast. All you had to do was pump steam down and melt it. So pyrite industry disappeared. And this is what we were left with. Pyrite, you expose it to the air, the sulfur and the iron are oxidized, the iron oxides spilled into ochre minerals. And that's the orange stains. And the sulfur turns into sulfuric acid. And that's why Redwood Road is all etched to this day. And Geranium Place is an acid runoff mess. And this is the headwaters of Chimes Creek up above the Leona Quarry. So you could say that partnership between the city and Geology had sort of fizzled. It kind of worked for a while and then left a mess behind. So that's the dialogue between Oakland's people and Oakland's geology. And now maybe we look at this image again, and maybe you can see some of what I was talking about. Maybe it looks different to you now that you've seen what's underneath. And that's one thing I wanted the book to do, to let you get a deeper appreciation of deep Oakland. And what are we going to be, 1850, that's seven generations ago, pretty much. I don't know what they were thinking about 7 generations ahead, but we are always urged to think 7 generations ahead. And I don't know. What's this going to look like 150 years from now? I can say a few things. There are almost certain to be 2 major earthquakes, 2 major groundbreaking earthquakes on the Hayward Fault between now and then. Our water supply will be very tight. One simply because there'll be more people. I think that's safe to assume. And 2, the Sierra Nevada will probably not have as much snow as it does now. I think that's safe to assume too. I also think it's safe to assume that very few of today's buildings will be there. Another big challenge is the sea will rise. Sea levels rising. It is inevitable. It will not be reversed for many, many years, if ever. We may decide, our descendants may decide just to leave it be where it is, So what that means for Oakland is we're going to have, not us, our descendants, our grandchildren, and their grandchildren they will slowly adjust to the situation. This is going to be flooded. Lake Merritt will expand. The ground where the cypress structure collapsed will be inundated. Forget the harbor, The harbor, some of it will be okay. Treasure Island. All the new neighborhoods, the 50s neighborhoods in Alameda will disappear. Jingletown will be gone. The entire airport, Bay Farm Island, forget it. What do we do? I think that the airport will survive. We'll just have to raise it, I think we'll have to. But the railroads are too important, and face it, they're very strong, important corporations. They'll survive. I think they'll raise the tracks. The harbor is too important. We'll fix that part. It's everything else that we're going to have to do something with. So when I contemplate the past, the deep past, and I think about the immediate deep future, it always makes me appreciate today. And I took a walk a few days ago along 7th Street from downtown over the Fruitvale in this area that's going to face inundation. And all this will change. This is the outlet of the lake. That will all, when the sea is 2-3 meters higher, this will all be it will be changed. These buildings, this is the Chinatown Presbyterian Church, and this gorgeous thing. This old warehouse, you can see it's got a nice steel frame inside it, but you know, there's gonna be 2 major earthquakes. Are we gonna keep it? You know, are we gonna keep it for 150 years? And in 150 years, all this beautiful new construction will probably be gone. Everything around us we enjoy today, you know. I don't know how many Victorians there will be. Probably still have some homeless people. I hope not. And all this kind of vernacular architecture, it's so precious today. And the ephemeral stuff too. You know, the surfaces that Oakland has really gotten into, you know. I know you and I all hate the tagging, but you've got to admire the art, you know. And our cultural institutions, you know, will they last 150 years? I hope Oakland Heritage Alliance does. Our infrastructure, well, you know, will BART still be there? What will replace BART? You know? Or even, you know, the temple, the hills. I do know the hills themselves will still be there. They may not look the same. They may not have trees on them anymore. The houses may be gone. The hills are prone to landslides. The hills are prone to fire and earthquakes, you know. I don't know how long we'll keep living up there. The hills, I know they'll still be there. Will there still be cars? Will there still be parking? Everything could be different in 150 years, you know. So I'll just leave us with that and open the floor to questions. Don't be shy, yeah.
Back number of slides, there was a satellite picture of the actual today view of Oakland, and I guess it's northeast of Lake Merritt. There's a big circular kind of, you know, feature. One more. Yeah, see, just northeast of Highway 580. Yeah, that.
This,
Yeah.
that's that's Indian Gulch Creek. That's the valley of Indian Gulch, Trestle Glen, and Long Ridge Street, and all the streets. The streets invaded that ancient gravel that I showed you. It shows up in the street pattern. So that's what we're looking at. Yeah.
Yeah, when you talked about the Hayward Fall as a sort of a point boundary, of course, it's part of the whole San Andreas system, and the San Andreas, of course, is several miles to the west.
Mm-hmm.
So I guess I sort of feel like this area is sort of not really, it's sort of an intermediate zone. Oakland and, you know, San Francisco, since the fall goes out of Daly City to the ocean for a while.
Yeah.
So, I mean, what is actually the geology, I guess, of Oakland west of the Hayward? And, you know, as I say, it's sort of like, this is sort of a messy area, put it that way.
It's pretty messy. Between the block of the Earth's crust between San Francisco, between the Hayward Fault and the San Andreas Fault, it's entirely a body of rock called a Franciscan complex. And San Francisco itself is full of it. It's a mixture of chert, sandstone and blue schist and serpentine. So it's a bloody mixture that geologists didn't know what it meant until they figured out plate tectonics 60 years ago. That's the quick answer. And on the other side, it's like I said, like I showed you, it's a mixture of younger rocks that were carried here from elsewhere. But yeah, the boundary between the Pacific plate and North America plate is actually a wide one.
Yeah.
It extends from the Concord Fault, which runs through Concord, past the San Andreas to the San Gregorio Fault, which runs up the coast, touches the coast there. So it's like 80 miles wide. And the whole coast range is actually the plate boundary. And they're all prone to earthquakes. Every one of them is active. Yeah.
A lot of the East Bay is subject to liquefaction. And San Francisco built an auxiliary water system after the 1906 fire to fight fires. But Oakland and Berkeley don't have that. What are the chances of a big fire after an earthquake?
The chances of fire after a big earthquake are 100%. That's just a fact. Fortunately, we've known that, and all the reservoirs up in the hills have been converted or are being converted to large, very sturdy steel tanks, so they won't. They'll buckle like you crumple a can, but they won't break the way the old reservoirs would. The major water transmission lines have been strengthened where they cross the fault. They've actually dug out large vaults, and now the pipeline itself is flexible. So when they're offset, they'll hold their integrity. So yeah, to that extent, we'll still have water supply, but the mains will fail, all over the place. And it won't be quite as bad as San Francisco, but it'll be bad. It'll be bad. But I didn't come here to talk about that. Yeah, well, yeah.
So looking at this map, one of the only places that isn't built over besides the deeper hills is just here up the hill in the cemetery.
Yeah.
Is it possible to see some of this geology and see some cool rocks? Is there anything left?
Quite a bit of geology. That's what chapter 4 is about. Chapter 4 is entirely about Mountain View Cemetery. Really cool place because, as you say, it's the landscape is left as it was, except for all the graves. But those are cool. And I talk about some of the people who are there. Some of them are famous geologists. It's one of my favorite chapters to write.
Follow-up question to that: do you think that the cemetery might embrace some more of that, like not just the historic preservation of the people's history, but also, the way culture is headed towards this further into environmentalism and sustainability? Do you think that might be something that would be
You mean the
worth
cemetery?
preserving? Yeah,
Could you repeat the question, please?
I guess what you're asking is if there will be docent tours of the cemetery that talk about geology.
Oh.
And yeah, I could do that.
I've been up on Broadway Terrace near the golf course, and there's a bunch of ground rock that's red in color. Is that a source of ochre, or what is it?
No, but the red rocks in the cemetery are Franciscan church.
Oh, okay.
They're deep sea mud that collected way out in the ocean, so there's nothing there, just a whisper of the very finest clay particles. That's what that is. In the back, yeah.
Yeah, I got a question about Leona, well, I wanna call it Leona Canyon, but that's ambiguous, because there were two canyons.
Right.
One going from one going from Merritt College towards Keller, and the other coming down towards, Mountain. The section of the canyon coming down towards Mountain has a year-round stream in it. There's a lot of water coming down that canyon, even in the depths of the drought. We had waterfalls and pools up there. Do you have any idea where that water comes from?
You're talking about Horseshoe Creek, Horseshoe Canyon,
No, the next canyon over from Horseshoe.
the Leona Canyon open space.
Yes, that part.
Why is there so much water?
Why is there so much water?
Well, it's very steep, you know, it cuts down. And the canyon that does that, it intersects the water table. Which means, you know, a canyon that intersects the water table, the stream becomes permanent. And also, I think the houses there probably water a lot too. Yeah.
Speaking of water, we're talking about the oceans raising 25 to 50 feet
Not that
tomorrow.
much. Not that
But, you know,
Mhm.
by 2050, 2070, what is the impact of all this water pressure on all this quake activity? How the two relate?
Fortunately, sea level rise will not affect the earthquakes. It will not. Even things like, it takes a lot to trigger an earthquake. One example is when we built the Lake Oroville. The Oroville Dam was like the nation's tallest dam when we built it. About 10 years after we built it and filled it up, earthquakes started happening because of all that water on the Earth's crust. So that's the kind of thing it takes for human activities to trigger earthquakes. The other thing it takes to trigger earthquakes is doing a lot of deep disposal wells, down deep in the Earth's crust where there's pre-existing stress.
Yeah.
And so you're kind of lubricating it. And that's why Oklahoma has become the earthquake capital of the country. And Texas. It's past 8. Is it time to one last question?
And the alluvial areas are all in the flatlands. Are they subject to liquefaction during earthquakes?
Are the flatlands susceptible to liquefaction? Basically, if they're near sea level, yes. If there are layers saturated with water, they can be, when they're shaken, it makes all the grains of sand separate from each other. You know, normally they're all kind of interlocked. You know, that's so when they get shaken, they're sort of floating. The water gets loose. The water can erupt, boil out of the ground, and soften all the ground, which is what happened when the Cypress structure failed in 1989. It is a widespread hazard. Actually, downtown is not really subject to liquefaction. Around the edges it is, because that big body of sand kind of tails off around its edge. But, downtown Oakland, City Hall, all those buildings, they're gonna be okay for the most part. The modern ones. The old buildings. Okay, one more.
Well, I've got this rock that I dug out from under my house.
We'll break up now, then we can do that, yeah. Thanks. Thanks a
I
lot,
don't know if you
folks.
can show it. It looks like it was in a stream bed. It looks like it was volcanic to begin with. It dug that about 2 feet down in from the clay.
Where exactly?
San Antonio above East Fort, above, right about in here. Above Foothill above 20th Avenue at Foothill Boulevard,
Okay.
near San Antonio Park.
Just a couple feet down.
Yeah.
Could be human. I don't know.
Okay. I think
Because
it's,
I have,
I don't think so.
that's about the biggest, about as big a piece of rock as I've ever seen in those.
Yeah, same here. I don't think it's Adobe, but, okay. Well, to be resolved later.
Here, here. Thank you very much.
Thank you.